As far as we know, he's never sponsored a pro-gun bill in Congress. He's certainly not a member of the Freedom Caucus. And now Missouri's Jason Smith is headlining a fundraiser for the biggest gun grabber in Congress. Folks, watch this video and take immediate action. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the Missouri Firearms Coalition. I think every gun owner in America right now is very aware of the fact that gun owners are facing a two-front war right now in the fight to defend our gun rights. On the one side, we have our more traditional, radical, ghoulish Democrats versus the generic Republicans. But the other side of that battle is a much more insidious fight between backstabbing rhino traitors and conservative firebrands who will fight to defend our gun rights, both here in Jeff City, but also in Washington, D.C. And that is the context of today's video. You see, for years, our members have asked us, is 8th Congressional District Jason Smith part of that rhino backstabbing traitor class, or is he what he claims to be, part of the conservative class? And frankly, for years, we've given no definitive answer because we had no real ammo to use in making that decision. But Jason Smith has now made it abundantly clear that he stands in the rhino traitor class. And you may be thinking to yourself, those are big words. Well, folks, I'm going to back up what I'm saying. So watch the video. And if you agree with us, when it's all said and done, pick up your phone and call Congressman Smith. But first, let me paint the picture. We all remember what it was like in 2021 and 2022. Every day, the way it seemed, a new gun control bill was filed in the House or Senate. Every couple of weeks, there was a sham committee hearing run by Jared Nadler that rammed bills through committee with no chance to amend them, almost no debate, and made them floor eligible. And Nancy Pelosi rolled gun control bill after gun control bill through the House over to the Senate. It was a tough time. We got our teeth kicked in, frankly, for 2 years in a row. Now, almost all of those bills, thank goodness, died in the Senate. One major gun control bill did pass. But the reason why any of them moved at all was because Nancy Pelosi was able to convince a small number of backstabbing rhino traitors to vote with her and her conference to make it possible. You see, Pelosi wanted to have two things. She wanted to have cover politically to say this is a bipartisan gun control bill. And number two, she needed to have the votes. The majority she had in 2021, 2022 was one of the smallest in 100 years. And she needed to have Republican crossover votes to help her advance gun control. And the person she turned to every single time, the leader of that rhino attack on your gun rights, is Pennsylvania Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. Here's a photograph of Congressman Fitzpatrick. As you can see, not exactly the most aggressive specimen of manhood. He's basically an eel who wears a suit and tie to work. Brian is the definition of the deep state. Former FBI, former U.S. attorney turned congressman who has used every day of his career in Washington, D.C. to attack our gun rights. I want to list off some of the bills that he has voted for and sponsored so you know what a devious SOB Brian Fitzpatrick is. Now, there's so many of them. I'm going to pull just 4 or 5 of them, but I have to have notes here behind my screen because I can't keep them all straight in my head. The main gun control bill Biden did pass last year was S-2938. As you may remember, this bill gave Joe Biden $750 million to use in bribing the states into passing red flag gun seizures. Brian was a yes vote on that bill. But that was not by far the worst of them. He also was a yes vote last summer on H.R. 2377. This bill, which did not become law, was a national red flag gun seizure law. This means that any gun owner could be red flagged if a personal enemy of theirs picks up the phone and calls the authorities and say, you could be dangerous. And a liberal judge could hear that complaint and say, yeah, I agree, go take his guns. The worst one, though, last year was actually H.R. 1808. This was the national assault weapons ban in Washington, D.C. H.R. 1808 was so bad that only 2 Republicans in the entire country aided Pelosi in doing that, and Fitzpatrick was one of the ones who did that. But that's just in the last couple of years. Previously, he was a lead sponsor on bills to add bump stocks to the NFA Act. He was a lead sponsor on bills to make it a crime for your son or daughter to own an AR-15 unless they were 21 or above. He was the lead sponsor on other bills, he opposed the bill, rather, to pass national reciprocity clear back in 2015. And right now, today, as we speak, Brian Fitzpatrick is the lead sponsor on Joe Biden's national gun registry bill. It's H.R. 715. And folks, this is even worse than Pelosi's version 2 years ago because this bill has even fewer exceptions. But Fitzpatrick hates gun owners so much that he has led the charge by sponsoring this bill. And guess what? The Democrats are jumping on this bill in droves because they know it's far easier to pass gun control if it was sponsored by a Republican. 181 Democrats have now co-sponsored H.R. 715 this year right now. This scoundrel is so terrible that when he ran for re-election last year, he was one of a handful of Republicans who had the endorsement of Michael Bloomberg's Everytown for Gun Safety. So I'm sure by now you're getting the point, right? When it comes to backstabbing traitors, there is nobody worse in all of Congress today, right now, than Pennsylvania's Brian Fitzpatrick. Now, I'm going to get to the point. You would think then that Republican leaders in the House would want to distance themselves from this guy. In fact, you would expect that conservatives would declare him persona non grata and want to drum him out of the conference altogether. And you would think that would especially apply to senior members of Missouri's congressional delegation like Jason Smith. After all, Jason is the Ways and Means chair. He's a very powerful member of the leadership class in D.C. right now, and he calls himself a conservative. So you would think he would say, hey, you know what, Fitzpatrick, if you want to act like a Democrat, if you want to vote like a Democrat, if you want to carry bills for the Democrats, get the hell out of our party and join the Democrats. If he did that, I'd be very impressed. I bet you would be as well. But instead, we were recently informed that in just a couple of weeks, Missouri's own Jason Smith is hosting a swanky cocktail fundraiser for Brian Fitzpatrick. This is a screenshot from Punchbowl News, one of the most well-read blogs in D.C. As you can see, the top speaker at this event will be the swamp monster himself, Kevin McCarthy. But as you can see in the red outlined paragraph, our own Jason Smith will be attending the event as a co-head of the fundraiser. Tickets range from $500 to $2,500. So when you close your eyes and try to envision a smoke-filled backroom, swanky DC cocktail fundraiser, that's exactly what we're talking about here. This event might raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in one night for Fitzpatrick and make it easier for him to maintain his nonstop war against our right to keep and bear arms. So Jason Smith, far from trying to stay away from this guy, is headlining a fundraiser for this piece of trash. And so the only question left for Missourians to ask is, what the hell is Jason Smith thinking? And who does he think he is? You know, I don't know any Missourian in the entire state who picked up the phone and said, hey, Jason, you should throw a fundraiser for the Republican who is leading the fight for Biden's gun control agenda. Yeah, you should go use your status as the Ways and Means chair coming from red Missouri to go raise money for this scoundrel. You know, to my knowledge, and I don't know every single bill filed in Congress. Our team has researched this. We've reached out to our friends on Capitol Hill. To our knowledge today, and if I'm wrong, let me know and we'll change it. But to our knowledge, Jason Smith, despite all of his years in Congress, has never sponsored a pro-gun bill. Sure, he tweets about being pro-gun, but you can tell a person based on their deeds, not their words. My mom taught me that. My grandparents taught me that. My guess is that your grandparents and your parents taught you that as well. And so I don't look at what someone tweets on Capitol Hill. I want to see what bills they sponsor, because when the bills come to the floor for a vote, it's already all done. Those votes have been pre-tallied in advance. Everyone knows how they're going to vote. The real work is in sponsoring bills and pushing them through the committee process. And to our knowledge, Smith has never once done this. We know for a fact he's not part of the Freedom Caucus, who is, fighting every day to stop the rhino agenda in Washington, D.C. In fact, all that Smith has been known for this year, this Congress, is being Kevin McCarthy's boy in trying to whip Republicans into voting for him as leader back in January. The context here could not be more stark. So if this makes you mad, guys, pick up the phone and call Smith and tell him to stop aiding and abetting the enemy. His phone number is 202-225-4404. Because again, the difference could not be more stark. Conservatives in D.C. are leading the fight for gun rights, sponsoring the best pro-gun bills that we have seen in modern time in D.C. Matt Gaetz, for example, Congressman Gaetz from Florida, is a lead sponsor on H.R. 374. H.R. 374 would completely abolish the ATF. Of course, the ATF is strictly Joe Biden's foot soldiers in the war against gun owners, and under Gaetz's bill, it would be gone. That's leadership. But much closer to home for us, much closer to home for Missouri, is our own Eric Burlison, who is the lead sponsor on H.R. 450. This was the first bill that Congressman Burlison ever filed in D.C. Number one, H.R. 450, to totally repeal the NFA. The National Firearms Act, as we all know, is the vehicle that Biden is using to ban pistol braces, to go after bump stocks, to go after us in a way that can bypass the Congress and simply redefine items that are currently controlled in the NFA. So Burlison is leading the charge. Gaetz is leading the charge. These bills have been co-sponsored by some of the most ferocious gun rights champions in D.C. Lauren Boebert from Colorado, Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar from Arizona, Mary Miller from Illinois. You got Barry Moore, Alabama, Mike Collins from Georgia, Ogles from Florida. The best members of Congress are jumping on these bills because they know that now is the time to separate the men from the boys, that now is the time to figure out which Republicans are actually going to fight for gun rights and which ones are there to throw swanky fundraising cocktail dinners for the radical left masquerading as Republicans. Jason Smith has now made it very clear. He will not co-sponsor these bills, but he will headline fundraisers for the absolute biggest enemy to our gun rights in the entire Republican caucus. So if that has you upset, now is the time to call Jason Smith. Again, the number's on the screen above you right here. Give the guy a call and tell him a couple things. Tell him, number one, he better check himself, because no gun owner in Missouri has authorized him to hold fundraising dinners for Brian Fitzpatrick. So he better check himself. He better not attend the fundraiser, and he better apologize for ever lending his name to it in the first place. That's number one. And then tell him to actually do something for gun rights. We know he's not going to sponsor a pro-gun bill. At the very least, he could co-sponsor H.R. 374 and or H.R. 450. So pick up the phone and call him and tell him that. This is disgraceful behavior. This is not Illinois. This is not Maryland. We're not some purple state. We are the definition of red America. We have ferocious champions for gun rights that represent us here in Jeff City, that represent us in Washington, D.C., and Jason Smith clearly is not one of them. If we don't push back on this when it happens, all we're doing is emboldening Jason Smith to get weaker and weaker and weaker, and to do more and more and more to support anti-gun rhino traitors who want to put you and I in prison. This is the battle of our time to separate backstabbing rhinos from conservative firebrands. And when we have clear evidence like this, like we have today with this fundraiser, it's important that we all take action. So guys, again, number one, call Jason Smith. Number two, share this video online. And number three, if you haven't yet done so, join the fight for freedom today at www.joinmofc.com.